Ethan Walker began to recognize the change not in grand gestures, but in the quiet habits that reshaped his days. He woke earlier, checking his phone before his feet touched the floor. He lingered at work longer than necessary, telling himself it was dedication, not desire. Each justification felt reasonable on its own, yet together they formed a pattern he could no longer ignore. Claire Bennett mirrored that restraint with practiced precision. In meetings, she remained composed, addressing Ethan no differently than anyone else. Yet when the room emptied, she sometimes paused beside his desk, asking a question she already knew the answer to, simply to hear him speak. Their conversations carried a careful intimacy, balanced on pauses and half-finished sentences like the tea home. Olivia Walker sensed the shift before she understood it. Ethan listened less, his attention fractured. When she spoke about her day, he responded politely, but his thoughts were elsewhere. One evening, she asked him directly if something was wrong. Ethan hesitated, then shook his head. Just tired, he said. The lie tasted thin, but Olivia accepted it. Relieved to avoid a conversation neither of them seemed eager to have, Claire, too, was living with unease. Daniel Bennett continued his routine of late nights and distant conversations. When he was present, his focus remained fixed on his phone or the next obligation. Claire found herself measuring time differently, counting not hours but moments. Those brief exchanges with Ethan that felt unexpectedly vivid. She told herself it was temporary, a response to neglect, not a reflection of her character. A scheduled business trip forced a shift they could no longer control. Ethan and Claire were assigned to present together, a practical decision that made sense on paper. The journey was efficient, professional, and outwardly uneventful. Still, the shared flights, the long discussions over preparation notes, created a closeness neither could pretend was accidental in the quiet of a hotel conference room. Claire spoke candidly about leadership fatigue, about the pressure of being admired yet unseen. Ethan listened, offering understanding without solutions. When he spoke of his own life, he avoided names, describing a relationship sustained more by history than affection. Claire did not press for details. She didn't need them. That night, alone in their separate rooms, both lay awake. The distance between their doors felt symbolic rather than physical, a boundary held together by willpower alone. Ethan stared at the ceiling, aware that he was thinking of Claire in a way that left no room for innocence. He felt ashamed, yet also undeniably alive. Upon returning home, the contrast was sharp. Olivia greeted him with distracted warmth, more curious about her own plans than his trip. Ethan answered politely, feeling like a guest in his own life. The silence between them grew heavier, filled with words neither seemed willing to speak. Mason Reed noticed the strain during a quiet lunch. Ethan was distracted, responding slowly, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. Mason studied him with concern. "You're carrying something," he said. "Just make sure it doesn't carry you somewhere you can't come back from." Ethan forced a smile, dismissing the warning, though it echoed uncomfortably close to his own fears. At work, Claire requested fewer meetings, sensing the danger of proximity. Yet the absence only heightened the awareness between them. Emails became more thoughtful, each message carefully composed, each response anticipated. When they did speak, it was with a restraint that felt like tension drawn tight. One afternoon, Claire finally addressed what lingered between them. She didn't name it directly. She spoke, instead of boundaries, of responsibility. Ethan listened, understanding that she was speaking as much to herself as to him. He agreed, promising nothing he wasn't sure he could keep. The promise held for days, then faltered under the weight of honesty. During a late meeting, Claire admitted that she felt seen with him in a way she hadn't in years. The admission was quiet, almost reluctant. Ethan did not reply immediately. When he did, he spoke the truth he had been avoiding, that he felt the same. The acknowledgement changed everything. They did not touch. They did not confess love. Yet the emotional line, once blurred, was now unmistakably crossed. Both felt it, sharp and undeniable. Guilt followed swiftly. Ethan found himself watching Olivia with new eyes, recognizing her distance, but also his own complicity. Claire avoided Daniel's gaze, aware that her silence carried meaning. Each carried the weight of choices not yet made, consequences not yet realized. In the days that followed, they pulled back, communicating only when necessary. The restraint was deliberate, painful. Ethan tried to reinvest himself at home, offering attention Olivia seemed surprised to receive. Claire focused on work, burying herself in tasks that left little room for reflection. Yet absence did not erase what had been acknowledged. It only clarified at point one evening. As Ethan prepared to leave the office, Claire approached him. There was no tension in her voice, only resolve. She thanked him for his professionalism and wished him a good night. As she turned away, Ethan understood that this was not an ending, but a pause. One charged with decisions yet to be made. He stepped into the night air, aware that the balance he had tried to maintain was slipping. The question Claire had once asked in jest now pressed against his thoughts with relentless seriousness. What if the answer changed everything? And more importantly, what would it cost to discover it? The uncertainty Ethan carried didn't fade with time. It sharpened. During the week, Claire moved through their shared space like a visitor with an itinerary, present but never settled. She answered questions politely, laughed at the right moments, and offered affection that felt scheduled rather than spontaneous. Ethan noticed how rarely she initiated conversation now, how silence filled the pauses where ease used to live. He tried to be patient. Patience had always been his strength. On Wednesday evening, he suggested they cook together, an old ritual that once anchored their nights. Claire agreed, but she spent more time checking her phone than chopping vegetables. When Ethan commented on it, lightly, almost joking, she smiled without warmth. "You're counting now?" she asked. "I didn't realize we were keeping score." "I'm not," Ethan replied, though part of him wondered if she was WY Friday. The pattern was undeniable. Claire's energy shifted as the weekend approached, a subtle brightening that had nothing to do with him. She dressed with more care, lingered longer in front of the mirror, and spoke in vague plans that excluded Ethan by default. When he asked if she wanted to do something together on Saturday, she hesitated before answering. "I already told Lucas I'd meet him," she said, as if reminding him of a dentist appointment. "Maybe Sunday." Ethan nodded, though disappointment settled heavy in his chest. He didn't argue. He didn't forbid. He simply watched her leave the next morning with a quick kiss and a promise. She didn't elaborate on AT work. Megan Hall noticed the distraction Ethan could no longer hide. He missed details in meetings, reread emails twice, and stared at nothing when he should have been focused. During lunch, she sat across from him, her voice careful. "You don't look fine," she said. "You look like someone waiting for a question he doesn't want answered." Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. Is it possible to be replaced without anyone admitting it? Megan didn't answer right away. "Emotional distance can feel like replacement," she said finally, "even if no one calls it that." That night, Ethan tried again to talk. Not to accuse, not to demand, just to understand. Claire listened with crossed arms, her patience thinning as he spoke. "You're imagining problems," she said. "Lucas knows me in ways you don't. That doesn't mean I love you less." The sentence landed harder than she intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. Ethan heard the comparison she didn't deny. "Knowing you," he said quietly, "shouldn't be a competition." Claire's expression shifted, irritation giving way to defensiveness. "You're acting like I owe you every part of myself," she said. "I don't. I'm allowed to have a past." "I'm not asking for your past," Ethan replied. "I'm asking where I fit now." She looked away, and that was answer enough. Saturday passed slowly. Ethan cleaned the apartment, answered emails, and tried to distract himself with tasks that required no emotion. When Claire returned late that evening, she was energized in a way he hadn't seen in weeks. She talked quickly, laughed at memories he wasn't part of, and stopped herself mid-sentence more than once, as if editing details that didn't belong in their shared space. Ethan listened. Listening had become his role. Later, when the apartment quieted, he lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. He thought of Daniel Foster, his older brother, who had once told him that trust didn't mean tolerating confusion. At the time, Ethan had dismissed it as cynicism. Now, the words felt uncomfortably relevant. The next morning, Claire announced she was meeting Lucas again. Just for breakfast, she said, as if that softened the choice. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He watched her tie her shoes, her movements practiced, confident. "Do you miss him?" he asked, not accusatory, just tired. Claire paused. For the first time, she didn't answer right away. "It's complicated," she said at last. Ethan felt something settle into place, not relief, but clarity edged with pain. Complicated meant unfinished. Habit meant attachment. And reassurance, he realized, wasn't something he could negotiate. After she left, Ethan stood alone in the apartment that still looked like a shared life. He understood now that whatever was happening didn't need to be named to be real. The distance, the deflection, the careful omissions, they were shaping a truth he could no longer ignore. When his phone buzzed later that afternoon, it wasn't Claire. It was a message forwarded by accident, a brief glimpse of conversation not meant for him. Lucas's words were unmistakable, familiar in their ease. "I missed you more than I expected." Ethan stared at the screen, his reflection faint against the glass. He didn't feel angry. He felt replaced in increments, eroded by moments he had been told not to question. As he set the phone down, one thought became impossible to dismiss. If this was only a habit, it was already costing him everything. Ethan didn't confront Claire immediately. He needed to understand what he was feeling before he spoke, because he had learned that reacting without clarity only gave her room to deflect. For 2 days, he watched, listened, and measured the space between them. It widened quietly, not with arguments, but with avoidance. When he finally asked her to sit down with him, Claire knew it wasn't casual. She noticed the stillness in his voice, the way he didn't soften his posture to make the conversation easier. They sat across from each other at the small dining table, the same place where they had once planned trips and shared late-night laughter. "I saw the message," Ethan said. He didn't specify which one. He didn't need to. Claire's shoulders stiffened. "You went through my phone?" "No," he replied calmly. "I didn't have to." Silence stretched between them. Claire looked down at her hands, then back up, her expression carefully neutral. "You're taking things out of context," she said. "Lucas and I talk. That's all." Ethan nodded slowly. "You talk every weekend. You talk when you're with me. You talk in ways you don't talk to anyone else." He paused, choosing honesty over restraint. "You're closer to him than you are to me." "That's not fair," Claire said quickly. "He's known me longer." "And yet," Ethan replied, "you're building something with him now." Claire opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. The denial she had practiced seemed to falter under the weight of consistency. "I haven't done anything," she said instead, her voice quieter. "Nothing you can point to." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "That's the problem. Everything important is happening where I can't see it." The words lingered, heavier than accusation. Claire stood and began pacing, her movements restless. "You're making me sound dishonest," she said. "I've been upfront. You've been selective," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." She stopped pacing and faced him, frustration flashing across her face. "Lucas understands me," she said. "He listens without judging. He doesn't make me explain myself." Ethan felt the truth land with painful clarity. "Because he doesn't have anything to lose," he said. "Edo." Claire's expression shifted, something like guilt flickering before she pushed it aside. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "I just didn't want to lose him completely." "And what about losing me?" Ethan asked. The question hung unanswered. Claire looked away, and in that moment, Ethan understood that love without priority was just attachment in disguise. Later that evening, Ethan went for a long walk, the city lights blurring into patterns he didn't register. He called Daniel Foster, not because he needed advice, but because he needed grounding. Daniel listened without interruption, then spoke with the calm firmness Ethan had always admired. "You're not asking for too much," Daniel said. "You're asking for honesty. If someone can't give that, you already have your answer." When Ethan returned home, Claire was waiting. She looked anxious now, stripped of her earlier confidence. "I don't want this to end," she said. "I can stop seeing him." Ethan studied her face, searching for certainty. Because you choose me, he said. Or because you don't want to lose what's familiar? Claire hesitated. The pause was brief but revealing. I need time, she said finally. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him. Time, he realized, was what she had been giving Lucas all along. He stood, not angrily, not dramatically, just decisively. Take it, he said, but understand something. She looked up, eyes wide. If you have to think about whether I'm enough, Ethan continued, then the answer already isn't yes. Claire reached for him, then stopped herself, as if unsure of her right to close the distance. Ethan picked up his jacket, the gesture simple but final. He wasn't leaving forever. Not yet, but he needed space to hear his own thoughts without hers overlapping them as he stepped outside. The air felt colder, sharper. Ethan didn't know how the story would end, but for the first time, he knew where he stood. And that knowledge, though painful, felt like the beginning of something honest. Ethan stayed with his brother for 3 nights, long enough for the noise in his head to quiet into something recognizable. Distance didn't erase the ache, but it gave it shape. He realized how much of himself he had been bending, how often he had mistaken endurance for love. By the 4th morning, the answer he'd been circling finally settled. When he returned to the apartment, Claire was already there, sitting on the edge of the couch as if she'd been waiting in the same position for hours. She stood when she saw him, hope and fear colliding in her expression. I've thought about what you said, she began. I'm ready to stop seeing Lucas. Completely. I choose you. Ethan listened without interrupting. He noticed the precision of her words, the careful way she avoided details. When did you decide? He asked. Last night, Claire said quickly. After you left. I realized I didn't want to lose us. Ethan nodded, absorbing the timeline. Did you tell him? Claire hesitated. I will. The pause mattered. It always had. They sat facing each other, the familiar space between them suddenly foreign. Ethan spoke slowly, not to persuade her, but to be accurate. I don't doubt that you care, he said. But choosing me can't be something you arrive at after weighing alternatives. Claire's eyes filled, her voice softening. People make mistakes, she said. I didn't cross any lines. You crossed mine, Ethan replied. Not once. Repeatedly. She reached for his hand, then stopped, reading the finality in his posture. So that's it? She asked. You just walking away? I'm walking forward, Ethan said, without confusion. The word surprised even him. He felt grief, yes, but also relief, a loosening he hadn't known he needed. He stood, not rushing, not lingering. Claire didn't follow this time. She stayed seated, arms folded around herself, watching him collect the last of his things. Weeks passed. The apartment became quieter in ways Ethan hadn't anticipated. There were moments when he reached for his phone out of habit, moments when he almost missed the version of Claire he believed in. But the quiet held something new, too, space to think without second-guessing his instincts. Megan noticed the change first. You look steadier, she said one afternoon. Not happier, just steadier. That's a start, Ethan replied. He heard about Claire through fragments, mutual acquaintances, and accidental sighting. Lucas didn't last long once secrecy was gone. The intensity faded without the thrill of being chosen in private. Claire seemed smaller in those stories, not villainous, just human and late to understanding. One evening, months later, Ethan ran into her at a bookstore. They exchanged polite words, careful smiles. Claire apologized, not dramatically, but sincerely. I didn't realize what I was risking, she said. I did, Ethan replied gently. That's why I left. They parted without promises that as Ethan stepped back into the street, he felt the story settle, not with triumph, but with truth. Some habits weren't harmless. Some jealousy wasn't weakness. And love, he had learned, wasn't proven by how much one could tolerate, but by what one refused to accept. He walked on, carrying that lesson with him, knowing it would shape whatever came next.